This podcast is brought to you by RevUp Academy. Do you ever feel like you're walking into a new year with the same goals and same old habits, hoping that something magically clicks in your customer success career? You want more confidence, more revenue leadership, and a real path to promotion. But nothing changes because you never get the right guidance or the right support at the right time. Now imagine stepping into 2026 as a completely different version of yourself, the revenue-minded customer success pro that teams fight to hire, the strategic partner your executives trust, and the person who knows exactly how to run value-driven conversations, influence renewals, and tie customer outcomes to commercial impact. That version of you is not a fantasy. It just needs the right room, the right frameworks, and the right coaching. That is exactly what RevUp Academy is built for. It's my exclusive 6-week coaching program for a small group of ambitious customer success pros who want to level up fast. We only open the doors a few times a year because the program is intentionally intimate and high touch. If you want to be the first person to know when doors open in 2026, go and head over to thecustomersuccesspro.com/RevUp and join the VIP waitlist. Everyone on the VIP list gets early access and special pricing, so make sure you're on it. If you are serious about a better you in 2026, this is where it starts. Go to thecustomersuccesspro.com/RevUp to join our VIP list. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Anika Zubair, and welcome to the Customer Success Pro podcast, your go-to space for real talk, expert advice, and actionable insights in the world of customer success. I'm a CS executive leader, award-winning strategist, CS coach, and customer success fanatic. I help CSMs and CS leaders build the skills and the confidence to become revenue-driving pros and scale world-class CS teams. So whether you're brand new to CS or a seasoned leader, this podcast is here to support your growth. Because customer success isn't a destination, it's a journey. And I'm here to be your guide and navigate every step of your journey. So join me every Wednesday where you'll get fresh CS tips, tricks, and strategies you can actually use. Some weeks I'll share my own insights and best practices from working in CS over the last 13 years. And once a month, I'll bring on expert guests to dive into the most relevant and pressing topics in customer success today. So if you're ready to level up, hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in, and let's make your CS journey a little bit easier together. Welcome back, everyone. And today we're diving into what it really looks like to be the first-time customer success leader fully integrated into a go-to-market team. Now, I know many of you listening are either partnering closely with sales or marketing and or RevOps, or maybe you're wishing you had more influence across the entire go-to-market motion. So what happens when you are that bridge? The first customer success leader brought into the heart of a go-to-market strategy. That's exactly what we're going to be unpacking today. Joining me is Ashley Stamps-Lafont, the brilliant VP of Customer Success at Quotapath and the founder of the Success RX. Ashley has led customer success through some of the most high-stakes transitions in SaaS, including post-acquisition growth at Unity, where she helped scale revenue from $50 million to over $250 million in ARR without sacrificing customer outcomes. But that's not all. Ashley is also a passionate mentor, having helped over 50 underrepresented professionals break into and thrive in go-to-market roles. In today's episode, we are talking about what it really feels like to be the first customer success leader in the go-to-market organization and the mindset shifts that are required, and also how to earn your seat at the table. And of course, we're going to talk about how to build customer success with revenue at the heart from day one. So let's jump into it. Welcome, Ashley, to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here today. Before we get into the topic, I'd love for you to tell my listeners a little bit more about yourself. Kind of how did you get started in customer success and how have you ended up on the path that you find yourself on right now?
Well, I found my start in customer success, as everyone does, by failing out of neurobiology and having a crisis at 21. If we really want to get into it. But yeah, so in my current role as VP of Customer Success, this is my third time around as a VP. Prior to that, I went up through the ranks from being an individual contributor, employee number 28 at a startup in Copenhagen, Denmark. Went to Unity at the largest when we were 8,000 employees. And I found myself where I feel most comfortable as revenue leader at Quotapath, which has just hit 55 employees, if you can believe it. I know nowadays there are college degrees and university programs for customer success and account management. That was certainly not the case. I was baptized by doing with customer success, and about 15 years into it, I'm still here.
Yeah, I love that. But also love that he said failed neurobiology. I guess I could call myself a failed political science career person. I don't even know what I would have done with a political science degree, but like you said, I did not study it. I just ended up in CS, ended up in the startup scale up world, which is where I think you're thriving the most right now, which is really exciting. 55 is a great number, great size company. And I'm sure that means that the team is growing, but tell us a little bit more about the team at Quotapath, what you guys are doing and building. What is your team held accountable to? Because CS is so different at every company these days.
Oh, absolutely. So, Quotapath, we're a startup. We're actually a SaaS company primarily focused on empowering go to market teams that need to overhaul their compensation frameworks and hopefully automate a big portion of the manual effort required to pay reps. So, it was actually born out of frustration. We are a founder led company. All three founders are still involved in the day to day operations. And as their first VP of customer success, I am responsible for everything revenue outside of new business, which means as soon as it comes across as a new customer, we hold on to them for as long as possible. The team is actually pretty large, relatively speaking, when I think about other customer success teams in different companies. We have about a third of the company sitting in the customer success umbrella today. Yeah.
That's a lot. Like that in any organization, that's saying a lot, but it means that your company and founders, I guess, are really prioritizing customer success and what you're building. And like you said, like a revenue team, a revenue first leader, which we're going to jump into. But I'm also curious because you just said failed neurobiology, which is already, I love that everyone in CS comes from such different backgrounds. But I know you've dabbled in tons of different experience. Like you said, you've been at as small as like tiny startups up to 8,000 person companies. And I think you've spent some time in fractional roles as well. Like, I think based on all of your experience, like, how did that shape you into the leader you are today? How does that kind of career trajectory that you're on? Because I don't think any of us are on a linear career path at all. But I'm just so curious, how did all of your experiences lead you into what you're doing right now?
Well, yeah, so I did have a stint in fractional and I was intentionally fractional at that. So when I started in customer success, I didn't even know what a startup was. I just knew that I needed a job while I was still pursuing that neurobiology path. And I spoke English in a world where Danish was the business language. So startups wanted to sell to folks in the UK and the US. And here I come with my native English non regional accent because I'm from Wisconsin. And they said, we need somebody who can speak to this audience. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. When it came to customer success there, it's less focused on revenue at that point, and it was more on satisfaction. And as we have seen over the years, the remit of customer success has evolved. And I guess it has also evolved coincidentally with my change in companies or my change in status within those companies. So I learned that you can't get too comfortable, and when it comes to applying my knowledge, I don't have a set playbook that has worked for me for any two companies, either as an in-seat leader or as a fractional. And it actually supercharged me as a fractional because I was able to pinpoint so many different conditions and factors that could make sure that the advice I was giving actually related to the task at hand.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you pointed out that there's been a big shift in customer success in general from being more satisfaction or happiness or just adoption related customer success, which I totally agree. I think there was an era of customer success pre 2019 that was all about the NPS score or the CSAT score or just driving customer happiness. And then I think there was an era of customer success, maybe like the pandemic era, which was like growing, just keep growing, keep hiring as many bums and seats as you could get. And then now we find ourselves in the last 2 to 3 years in the revenue era. Although I personally do think revenue has always been part of the customer success conversation, it's just now so much more in the forefront of the conversation. And it's so interesting that you have that experience of fractional and then in-house, and now you've decided to come back in-house. Like, what made you make that shift? Because I think a lot of people like fractional versus in-house, but you've done a bit of both, and now you find yourself back in seat as the first VP of CS at this organization. What made you do that?
Well, a couple of things, because I had had such a varied background in customer success, being at small firms that were VC backed, doing 2.5 years in a PE backed environment as well. And I just didn't know where I wanted to go. So that's where the intentional fractional came from, because I almost used it as a taste test for this part of my life. Am I someone who wants to go into solopreneurship, as Anika has, everyone, in case you weren't unaware of that? Or am I someone who can operate as an in-seat leader? And if I'm in-seat, where am I most effective? Where do I feel most passionate? I've had the luck of working with teams and products that I wholeheartedly believed in. And I said, if I ever do go in house again, I need to make sure that it's with the right team. So I actually worked with 4 different teams for the year and a half that I was primarily working as a fractional. And fractional means that I am contractually bound for a period of time. I usually would have worked for 6 months, give or take. And it's to either fill a seat that is currently empty for, let's say, a CS leader who was in need of a backfill, or it's to provide strategic advice to a CRO or to a revenue leader who may not have a customer success counterpart. But in each of those 4, it's like 2 of them were PE backed, 1 of them was VC backed, 1 of them was bootstrapped. And I was actually able to say, where do I feel as if the challenge that this business is facing is one that really drives me? When it came to conversations with Quotapath, I had already come to the conclusion that it didn't actually matter the funding source. The funding source was less important. It was more about the stage, it was more about the work involved, and I knew that at this point in my career, I didn't wanna be an ivory tower leader. And the way that I consider those leaders to be leaders who only ever talk to a customer to schmooze, leaders who do not have their hands in the source systems that house the workflows or the processes, and that's fine. I think that that's a role that a lot of people aspire to when they think of an executive. I wanted to be the hands-on executive. And in the role as the first VP of customer success at Quotapath, I get to do just that.
Yeah, I love that. And you joined as one of the first CS people in general, but I think you are very new into the entire go-to-market motion that Quotapath is building. And we were just talking before we hit record that you're 6 months in, and I was just asking, is the honeymoon stage over now? But you're 6 months in. What has it been like so far? You're part of a budding, growing team, but it's also a team, like you said, that has changed so much, and you joined it intentionally to be a part of that people environment that makes so much sense for you, that moved from, like you said, fractional to in-house. What has been the standout moment so far as 6 months into your new role and being part of this new go-to-market function that Quotapath is building?
Well, a few things. It took 2.5 months, give or take, of conversations before I actually accepted the role. And if there are leaders, and I know that there are many who are trying to figure out what their next role will be, do not rush the process. I spoke with every member of my first team, from the VP of RevOps to our co-founders to our director of engineering. I knew what I was getting into, and I knew that the challenge was one that I was up for. So that meant that day one, May 12th of this year, I was working. As a matter of fact, I was representing both Quotapath and myself as a fractional at SaaStock, which is a go-to-market conference based out of the UK in Austin, Texas. So the honeymoon phase, I don't think it was there, but that isn't to say that I haven't enjoyed it. One of the biggest aha moments, just trying to make it customer successified, my aha moment that I knew I'd made the right decision was immediately after the organization was notified that it was me. I got so many personal emails and LinkedIn messages who said, I am so excited. And it wasn't these canned messages. They were coming to me with how excited they were to work with me on specific projects. And I said, they're setting me up for success. They've been through a lot as a business. Startups go through so many different evolutions before they even hit their 5th anniversary. And the fact that I was able to come in, say some very controversial things in some cases, not so controversial in others, but people had that inherent trust, that was a huge, huge win.
Yep. I love that. But I also love that it was so intentional, that you really did want to make that right move in your career, which I love that you highlight that we do need to take the time to really vet that out and understand. And I think for you, like you said, being at the number of organizations and the fractional roles that you have been in, you wanted to make sure you had the right seat and the right place within the entire function and within the entire business, really. And I've seen it, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, where customer success is almost forgotten about. It is an afterthought. It is built after we have churn. It's built after something horrific happens with a customer, and it's like, oh no, let's get a CS leader in and let's fix a leaky bucket for other intents and purposes. But it sounds like at Quotapath, and your intention was to be a part of a go-to market organization because revenue is at the heart of everything you're building in customer success. And it's really cool that, the team at Quotapath wanted that as well. So what's been your approach? I know it's been 6 months and you're probably still, again, baptism by fire, figuring it all out as it's happening at a startup. But what's been your approach to making sure that you're a core member of the go-to market team? Because again, usually sales and marketing almost always are a part of the go-to market team, and CS is almost on the back seat of that. How do you make sure that as the VP of CS, you're part of that org rather than the afterthought?
Well, a couple of things. I'm going to shout out our co-founders. Our North Star metric is GRR, gross revenue retention. It was the metric prior to me coming on board. It is the metric since I have been on board. The entire organization's corporate bonus is unlocked based on our gross revenue retention. The way that
Love that. Love that.
I mean, it is unique because typically, even for a startup, you hear them focus on growth. And while we are absolutely focused on growth, we know that a leaky bucket will continue to leak unless you actually fix your GRR. So I'm
Ooh, I
actually
love that. So everyone's responsible for GRR,
one
every
up
single person.
from the engineer who is working on fixing a bug to our VP of RevOps who's equipping me with insights about what I need to run my part of the business. Everyone has a GRR component to their compensation.
Ooh, that's so good. Oh, that's so juicy. I want to dive into that more. So let's talk a little bit more about metrics because I think every CS org divvies up metrics differently. Everyone has different ownership, but it sounds like GRR is the North Star overarching metric that matters the most at the business. But let's talk about your team and your metrics because I know you're a revenue first leader and I personally think that's the direction of which customer success is going. So every leader should own some slice of the revenue pie, let's call it. But what does that mean specifically for your team? Is it renewals? Is it expansion? Is it just churn and GRR? Like, what is it that if I were to hold a metric to your team and your role, what is it that you guys are looking after specifically?
In terms of revenue, we have goals split into GRR and upsells. We're currently a single product company. If we did go multi product, then we would have more of a cross sell motion. But we look at the gross revenue retention, which includes churn and contraction and renewals. And then we look at our upsell as the primaries. The folks who are responsible for, making sure that we maximize against those targets consists of customer success managers who focus most of their attention on implementation. We do have an account management arm that holds the commercial responsibility for all renewals and all upsell. And then we also have a solutions arm within customer success that helps out with some of our more complex use cases and ensuring that the implementations that require it have back-end resources to help make them successful.
I love that. I love that. I love that there's so many parts of the ownership piece there, not just NRR, which is, I think sometimes can be a great metric, but you've really broken it down into what makes sense for your team and what you're trying to do to influence those metrics as well, which I think a lot of people can relate to. But at the same time, it's much more actionable because sometimes we see this one metric and it's like, okay, great. We have this big, huge goal, which is super important to have ambitious goals, but it's like, how do we make that attainable for my team? Or how do we actually hit those goals and metrics? Which sometimes when you do put a revenue metric in front of a team that's never really owned a number like that, it can be quite intimidating. Have you ever had to deal with that with your team, or has everyone within the business just understood that customer success is a revenue generator? Or did you have to come in and kind of shape that with your team?
At Quotapath, it's understood, and I think it's because we sell a product to revenue teams. However, there are a number of our account managers who grew into that role after spending time as customer success managers. And we are focused on upskilling them in the areas that matter to make them fully performant as AMs. That includes negotiation strategies, objection handling, standing your ground in the face of customers asking for certain types of concessions. And I'm not going to really under I'm not going to underestimate the amount of attention and effort that it really takes to build up that muscle in someone who is used to being someone who has traditionally focused on, I will do what it takes to make you successful, rather than being the person who asks for the money.
Yeah. And it's a different mindset, like you just said. And there is skills that need upskilling when you do step into a role, because like you said, even when you talk to a customer in a renewal conversation and it turns into potential churn, there's a lot of objection handling that happens in that conversation. And you need to make sure that your team has the right skills to have those hard and difficult conversations with your customer. And sometimes, like you said, we have the relationship builders. We have the people who are the product experts, the ones who are really building out and establishing rapport. But then flipping and talking about growth can feel very icky and uncomfortable for some people, especially if you haven't been correctly trained or upskilled or understand that there is a different muscle that's required if you're not just building the relationship, but you're building the relationship to talk about growth and expansion and what more can happen as well. But I guess it makes sense because you guys are selling to revenue people. So it's almost ingrained in. So that makes a lot of sense. I know it's been 6 months, Ashley, but I want to talk about your first 30 days because when we were chatting, you did mention it was crazy and it was a lot. And like you said, you started working before you even actually started working. So a lot of people listening to this podcast might be thinking or might be stepping into a new role. And if they're the first time CS leader within an organization, walk us through what your strategy might have looked like for making sure you were building the right relationships early, maybe gaining some influence and establishing yourself as that go-to market leader rather than just another VP of CS.
Oh, for sure. So, a few things. I flew to Austin, which is the only place where we currently have an office. We are a remote first company, but half of our go-to-market team goes into the Austin office. So me starting my first few days with Quotapath in the middle of all of that were crucial. I needed to build relationships before I ask someone to be on my side and do things that I have, in my mandate. So I'd urge anyone who is a new leader, even if you're in a remote role, insist on making sure that you spend that time there. And I didn't spend time with executives besides one of our co-founders who happens to be in Austin. I spent time with the people in customer success and across the first team of sales and marketing. Beyond that initial relationship and rapport building, the second week was all about, well, who are our customers? So initially listening to a ton of gong calls. I think that I probably listened to 40 hours of gong calls on 1.5x. Okay. But it's because you want to be able to take what I heard from those conversations from the people who work with the customers to what did the customers ask about specifically and what can I get in terms of sentiment that can help shape my view of what's happening. After I kind of came up with that, I was giving readouts to not just the executive team. I report up to the CEO, but I was giving readouts to my team. Customer success had a weekly meeting, and I said, here's what I'm focused on with my 30, 60, 90. This week I've done this. I have questions about this. This didn't work out. And I think that being able to communicate early and often and very openly at all levels of the organization were really helpful in establishing that early trust. And they knew that I was somebody who came in to get things done.
I love that. I really do. And I love that you mentioned that you went in person. It's super powerful. I think as someone who has served as a global leader, but also a regional leader earlier on in my career, I found that a lot of times showing up in HQ made all the difference to how I was perceived, but also how I collaborated and worked with other people. I know we work in a remote first world, and listen, I love it. I love that we can just jump on a Zoom call and I can be talking to Australia or I can talk to someone in California and still be based here in London. But even in 2025 and beyond, I just find that it's going to be being in person with the people that you work most closely with can actually help build those foundations of trust and ways of working. And I kind of want to ask what you just meant about the first team. You just mentioned sales, marketing, customer success. You mentioned it as the first team, which I assume is your go-to market team. But can you tell us a little bit more? How do you collaborate with the first team that is sales and marketing? How do you guys work together?
So, our executive leadership team consists of VPs across customer success, sales, and marketing. That's one person. Our chief product officer, our director of engineering, director of people, and our co founders. So, it's a team that's relatively small. We are an organization that has tried to keep it very flat. I think across the entire company, you have no more than 4 hierarchical layers. And that first team is focused on driving the business objective, which in our case is maximizing gross retention. When I think of my first team, they are who I have my initial loyalty to because I know that in order for us to get to that objective, there isn't one of us that is able to phone it in one day. And if I need something from another team member on that team, then they're the first person that I go to. So it's at the executive level that we have this very strong first team mentality that honestly attracted me to Quotapath in the first place, because that is not something that I found is typical across a number of these organizations, where it's kind of dog eat dog. This is my function and I'm going to be super protective over it. And I know that I'm going to have this war with sales. That doesn't serve anyone any good, in my opinion. And first team for us is making sure that we're looking outside of what we do and thinking across the full go-to-market organization.
I love that. I do love it. And how is it that you guys actually then build and make sure that that full go-to market strategy is considered? Because as much as I think CS definitely is part of the go-to market strategy, it's almost natural for marketing and sales to work a lot closer than CS is. It's really is, because if you think about it, marketing is generating all the leads, they're working on getting any sort of prospect in the door, and then sales are closing that lead. And yes, CS is then continuing the journey, but every organization I've been, it's just sales and marketing have been just a little bit closer. And I know you mentioned first team. So how are you making sure that all three teams, I know you report to one leader, but like, how do you make sure that that team stays cohesive and is building a journey that makes sense for your customer and for your company as one?
Oh, well, I don't think there's a single day that goes by without us talking to each other. That constant communication, which for our business is centralized in Slack, at least twice a week, the entire executive team is meeting and we're discussing what's happening in our respective functions. And we're calling out dependencies that we have across other departments and discussing them openly. And I'm actually going to give a shout out to two people in particular. Our VP of sales and marketing is also the head of RevOps. So he has an obligation within his remit to equip us with the insights that we need. And the second really valuable player is our chief of staff, who has occupied almost every possible seat in the organization. So she understands where we have strengths in one function versus weaknesses in another. And she helps us see across to understand, are there perspectives that we're not hearing as a part of this meeting that perhaps we should?
I love that. It sounds like a very well balanced executive team. And when you just said first team, it just made me like remember being part of an executive team I was prior, and we called the executive team the first team, that we all need to function in a certain way and fill the gaps and make sure we're staying balanced, where someone's more analytical and someone's more personable, and like really figuring out how as a first team, as an executive team, we function to drive the company and the business forward, and then obviously bring our teams along for that as well. So it sounds like you have a really great working cadence, working environment, just working ways, really. Like you said, communication is at the heart of everything you're doing, which is so important, especially even if you can assume something, don't, because it's likely that there is just a loss if you do assume anything, and it's much better for anyone to clearly articulate, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what I need you to do. It's so much more helpful in that sense. And I love that you guys are building it from scratch. But I bet you a lot of people listening are also thinking like, well, we haven't built it from scratch, but I know I'm a part of the go-to market alignment, and I'm trying to get my foot in the door of being part of that first team that you've so beautifully created with your current team. I'm curious if you have any advice or tips or just any processes or anything that you can advise anyone listening on, like if they're a CS leader currently and they want to be part of that go-to market first team that you're talking about, how do they insert themselves into that conversation?
Well, one of the things that makes Quotapath unique is this first team has operated as a team before, for the most part. So a good portion of the execs actually worked together at a startup a few years ago that had a beautiful exit and was acquired by Cision. So that meant that I wasn't just coming in as the first VP of customer success. I was coming into a team where dynamics had been established long before I came in. I think if I were to come into another organization, what has really worked for me is respecting the dynamic, listening. Your powers of observation and your EQ needs to be tuned to max for you to understand the way that certain arguments are articulated and accepted versus arguments that are articulated and may unnecessarily cause friction or pushback. I also would stress that you should learn the language of the organization. And what may have worked for you previously or resonated with a different team may not resonate in the same way. So try some things out. Take your notes. I'm a big fan of using a tool like Granola or even Notion if you have access to it to be able to reassess after a meeting and say, which of these sort of points was well received? Which of these points do you think I should adjust? That can definitely help you supercharge your message, build that rapport, and insert yourself as a part of that team. I didn't know certain metrics that may have mattered to the Quotapath team, as an example. If I didn't know something, I meant that I made it clear that the next time I had that conversation, I did know as well.
Hey, I just want to quickly jump in and let you know that we are bringing back free Rev Up masterclasses in 2026. So if you are listening to this episode thinking, I really need to level up my revenue skills this year, but I have no idea where to start, you are exactly who I built Rev Up masterclasses for. Last year, so many CS pros told me that they wanted to drive more revenue, build better executive conversations, and stop feeling like they were guessing their way through value. But they never actually got the training that they needed. Now imagine walking into 2026 with total clarity. You now know how to shift every call from check-in to value-led conversations. And you know how to run discovery that actually uncovers expansion. You know how to build trust so customers view you as a strategic partner instead of that friendly task doer. That is the version of you that we're going to be building in this next masterclass. And the best part is that it is completely free. The next Rev Up Masterclass is happening on Wednesday, January 28th at 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I only run these a few times a year and seats fill up every single time. So because you're hanging out with me here on the podcast, you are going to get first access. So don't wait. Spots are super limited and I do not want you to miss it. So go and sign up for your front row seat and to take the first masterclass of the year. Just go over to thecustomersuccesspro.com/masterclass. That's thecustomersuccesspro.com/masterclass. I'll catch you there. Now back to our episode. Yeah, I love that. But I also love that you stay curious. Like you just said, even as a new leader, you of course can take notes, take experience from the multiple times that you've done it before. But a lot of times is learning to work with the team that you currently are part of. Like you said, you had founders coming who had worked together maybe for decades before, and you had to insert yourself into that. And a lot of that comes down to the communication, to the ability to really understand what they're doing, and the ability to really work cohesively is super powerful in any business. And if you are trying to become a part of that go-to-market motion, it's making sure that you start speaking that language that they understand. And I say this a lot in customer success, and I don't think we get enough credit for it, but we truly are the best translators. If you work in customer success, like I don't care how many actual languages you speak, you are the best translator because every single day we are translating. We're translating technical product jargon into simple statements for our customers. We're translating very difficult and hard customer conversations about product feedback into simple terms for our product managers to understand what they need to build next. Everything we're doing in CS is a play on translation, really. And if you want to be a truly great leader, you have to speak the language of what other people really understand. And I think that's amazing that you've been able to do that within the current organization you're in, and at Quotapath being so established, but still you taking the time to really learn that is really awesome. We talked a lot about your first 6 months, which has been really exciting and really a lot on. I know you mentioned board meetings and all the things that you've had to do so far. But now that you're 6 months in, thinking to the future, where is it that you kind of want to take the CS function in the next 6, 12, 24 months now that you're no longer new, you're established? What's the next big play for you at Quotapath with your current revenue first team?
I mean, we've had some amazing success on both the GRR and the growth goals in the last 6 months. We celebrated our highest ever NRR quarter in Q3 of 2025. So, if I can summarize in two different words, efficiency and growth are going to be paramount for us in 2026. I believe in the team that we have constructed. I think that we have a good degree of specialization, and it's more about supercharging with the existing team. We are AI first, and there
I
are
love that.
a few things that we're doing to kind of progress beyond note taking and really using AI as a partner for customer success. We are implementing a tool called Hook. So, shout out to the Hook team. Hook is a well established machine learning AI based orchestration partner for customer success that will be the, I suppose, account management teammate that we have been waiting for. Hook will anticipate potential churn and expansion 6 months prior to it happening. And we're really excited in being able to be a more intelligent team as a result, intelligent and efficient at the end of the day. In addition to that, I'm hiring. I'm strategically hiring. So we're actually going to combine our CSM and support functions. I'm hiring a director to oversee that part of the equation. And I'm also hiring in solutions, given that as we move up market and have more complex use cases, we certainly see that that is an area where the growth should be focused.
I love that. I love that. That's so exciting. So exciting. Such an exciting 6 to 12 months ahead. I can't believe all the things you've been able to do in 6 months and all the things that are yet to come in the next 12 or so months. Super exciting. I'm curious, and I think a lot of people are, and I have a little bit of a controversial question for you, which is we've talked a lot about revenue ownership, about being a part of a go-to market function. Um, I would love to know your thoughts on comp plans for CSMs if they are owning part of the revenue structure. So, like, what's your take on either CS leaders or CSMs being compensated based on revenue goals rather than adoption or consumption goals? Because I think a lot of CS has been compensated based on, hey, the number of calls you have with a customer or the number of onboardings or the number of times you've shown value in a call, right? But we measure sometimes based on usage of a customer. But I think the landscape is changing. At least that's my opinion. I'm super curious to hear your take on CS professionals being compensated based on revenue goals rather than adoption goals.
I mean, for me, it's really simple. I don't think that adoption should make its way into compensation. I think that adoption.
I love that. And end.
But I'll tell you why. And it's because your compensation should be driven by the behaviors that you want to drive, and those behaviors should help influence your business outcomes. It's
I
just that.
love that.
And
Simple. That's
as you
simple,
start thinking
clear.
about it, what is your board actually going to ask you how many QBRs you conducted, or are they going to ask about the ROI a customer was delivered and whether or not they're still a customer?
Exactly. Exactly. No one cares how many meetings you had. I still, till this day, hear people saying they're being measured on the number of business reviews or the number of calls a customer success manager is making. I'm like, what do those result in? Do any of those calls actually result in renewal? If there is a direct correlation, amazing. I'm super happy for your business. But I cannot see how having more calls, which most customers end up ghosting at a certain point anyways, having more calls is actually delivering value and delivering outcomes because it doesn't make sense to me. But I totally agree. I love how you kept it simple. We just have to keep compensating based on behaviors that we want to see. And that has to be revenue outcomes at the end of the day. And I absolutely love that you call it out.
Like, from that perspective, Anika, I think that it's a fear, but it's also a fear that comes from multiple parts of the organization sometimes. There are people who get out of hard sales and come into customer success because they don't wanna hold a quota. So
Yeah.
if customer success all of a sudden is a part of a revenue generating machine and compensation follows, that is less exciting for them. However, I believe that customer success is actually a business framework, even more than it is a team. And because of that, you should be measured on the metrics that the business cares about. Your compensation is going to follow some kind of a dollar, whether that's a revenue dollar or whether that's a margin dollar that relates to how expensive a fully loaded customer success manager or account manager is going to be. So if you try to think about compensation in just an activity format, then you're missing a really important part of your lens that may result in you being a nice to have rather than a must have when it comes to adjusting a P&L. And L. And I see too many customer success leaders, unfortunately, due to some of their own personal reservations, saying that customer success is still an activity or an adoption function. And I really think that that's holding things back.
100%. 100%. Like you said, your board, your executive team isn't going to measure how many times you've had a call or how many times you've delivered X. They're delivering, they want to know the revenue number. They want to know the ROI served. They want to know if your customers' outcomes are actually being reached. And that has to do with some level of renewal or upsell or something tied back and influence on revenue. And even if you're not in hard sales, I find this really funny because let's say NRR or GRR is your North Star metric, that's still a quota. We're just putting a different name on it.
Right.
That's all it is. Like, I'm sorry, if you're going from 100 to 120% NRR, that 20% is the quota. That is exactly what it is. We're calling it a goal. We're calling it a KPI. But since we're being really straightforward and honest, and Ashley kept it simple and clear, I'm going to keep it simple and clear. NRR is a quota that we're all being held accountable to. And so we need to just step up and be comfortable with the fact that we are revenue leaders. So I love that you kept it clear and simple too. I love that. Ashley, one more question before we go into quickfire, which is looking back at your career, your experience, the number of go-to-market teams you've served a part of, for anyone listening who's considering either stepping into the first-time go-to-market leadership role in CS, tips, any tricks, anything that you would say, hey, I would 100% if I had to do this all over again, I would double down on this one thing?
All right. I think that it's a really good question. And to be honest, everyone should be asking themselves whether or not they want to get into a customer success leader role that is revenue generating, or if there's another part of the customer ecosystem where they're best suited. That's the first question that someone really should be sitting with themselves to answer. If you are someone who considers sales to be a four-letter word in more than one way, then it's totally fine. But understand that the trend is going more towards customer success owning revenue than not. And you may be better focused on the support side, potentially looking at solutions that are more technical and do not have the need to own any type of revenue targets. And then beyond that, if you're on the revenue side, learn the financial metrics that are driving your business. When you have that knowledge, you're able to establish rapport more and and also build credibility faster with the executive team. You're able to articulate the way that your team's activities may translate into those objectives. I didn't know any of that until I was, no joke, maybe 6 years into my first CS leadership role. So knowing that before you go in, it's almost like showing up to poker with the best possible poker face possible. And I would want to make sure that those things are clear prior to making the jump.
I love that. Thank you so much. I could keep talking to you about this for probably hours, if not days. But I want to bring us to the quick fire question part of this podcast, where I love to challenge each one of my guests with a few questions where you have to answer each one in a sentence or less. Are you ready for the challenge?
Let's do it.
Amazing. Okay, the first question is, if you could predict the future, what do you think customer success will focus on next?
I think customer success is going to focus on driving outcomes more than activities.
Love it. Love it. Which app or software do you use every day or every week? And it can be on your phone or your laptop, and it can be CS related or not.
Slack. Oh my gosh. Slack all day for both my fractional coaching and also as VP at Quotapath. I use it with my family. I use Slack as my assistant. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have
I
access.
love that. That's hilarious. You move Slack into your personal life too. That's the first I've heard that. That's
Yes, I do have a family Slack instance. I am that bought in.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh. Okay, amazing. Next question is, if you could change one thing about customer success, what would it be?
We say no when we're fearful of change, and I want us to be more open to it. Whether that is a change of goals, whether that's a change of roles, I want us to be more open to evolving because we'd avoid a lot of identity crisis problems if we did.
That's so powerful. Let's stop saying no. Let's embrace the change. I love it. I love it. Okay, another question is, in the world of AI that we're working and living in, what's one cool new way that you're currently using AI? It can be in the CS space or can personally as well.
I'm going to shout out someone that I just promoted to senior customer success manager. One of the reasons that I think it's such a brilliant case, we were spending up to 45 minutes for each of our new customers building out kickoff call decks. And he has completely automated the creation using a combination of Notion, Zapier, and Google Slides. And there are tools out there that are, selling for $20,000 to $50,000 a year to do it. And we were able to get this up and running in less than 2 weeks. So I think that that's a creative, easily configurable using everyday tools that many go-to-market teams have in their ecosystem that has helped boost our efficiency.
I love that. And is like AI ingesting the customer's data and like putting it into slides or something like that with your CRM? Or is it just,
Yeah.
I love that. That's so powerful. It's like amazing. Things that we already hold and have. Why not make use of all the tools that we're already using? That's so cool. Love that. Awesome. Okay, last question is, who should be my next podcast guest?
Emma Lowe. She's doing amazing things for digital customer success and the customer success community in Canada and the US. I think that she has a unique perspective as someone who has been a business owner multiple times and is now working as a scale partner at Noibu. I think that your audience would learn a lot from her varied experience.
I love that. Emma, if you're listening, which Emma, I do love Emma Lowe, but if you're listening, let's collaborate. Let's do a podcast episode. Thanks so much, Ashley, for your time, your energy, your authentic sharing of your experiences so far. I've really appreciated it. I know my listeners have as well. If my listeners do have any follow-up questions or want to take this conversation forward, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way to get in touch with me is through LinkedIn. My DMs are open, and I'm quite active in making sure I get back to anyone. And in particular, if you're interested in hearing more takes on customer success becoming a revenue-generating engine, I also post regularly on LinkedIn and would be happy to engage with you there.
Amazing. Thank you so much again, Ashley. I loved our conversation.
I did too, Anika. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Customer Success Pro podcast. I hope you picked up something valuable to take back to your team. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you took just 10 seconds to leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps more CS pros like yourself discover the show. And creating new episodes takes a lot of work, so leaving a nice review keeps me motivated to keep creating. And don't forget to hit subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcast episodes. I drop a new episode every Wednesday packed with practical tips. And if you've got a topic you'd love for me to cover or want to be a guest on my show, send me a message. All the details are in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. And hey, if this episode helped you, share it with a fellow CSM or CS leader. Remember, sharing is caring. Cheers to your CS journey, and I'll catch you next week for our next episode.